to the show, Samyu Hari.
Hi, Santosh Uncle. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure indeed. You're the youngest guest in my show so far.
Oh, well, I'm really glad to be here. I am so happy that I'm able to speak on this topic because it's not something I really get to expand on a lot of the time. And I do think, my experience is very different than most people. So, yeah, I'm so excited to get to speak about this.
Great. So I want to tell the audience why I invited you to the show,
Sure.
first off. So Samyu is the daughter of a good friend of ours, and I've been reading about what she's been up to from her parents, who are good friends, and obviously she's been up to some very interesting pursuits in her life. And she's good in study, she's academically strong, so that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to go into that. What got me interested is her journey through dance, which is a very physical and an art form. And she's also done her MS 150 bicycle ride, which is a ride that goes from Houston to Austin. It's a 150 mile close to ride. And so that's what got me intrigued with this young lady. And I find that people, the young adults today, deal with different challenges than the ones that we dealt with when we were young adults. And it's fascinating to see someone like you thrive. And I'd like to talk about how you take up these pursuits and get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then we'll dig in.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Samyu Hari. I am currently a sophomore in college. I attend the University of Southern California. I've been home for the past few months in quarantine and here in the Woodlands. I've grown up here in the Woodlands, and all of my achievements and everything, my hobbies, they've all been centered around the community. And with, the support of everyone, I actually began dancing when I was about 3 years old. And ever since then, I have been able to grow and use that hobby towards other efforts. Apart from dance, I do biking. I am very much into health and wellness. I love yoga, Pilates, and I overall just love keeping myself very busy. And so I'll elaborate more on that later, but that became an ongoing trend throughout my childhood. And as I became a young adult, was constantly just keeping a goal in mind. And I very much pride myself on having very supportive parents who have always told me, don't let anything hold you back, just go get it. And something I've kind of applied wherever I've gone. But I have one older brother who also, he was kind of my lead when it came to athleticism and, really staying fit, staying healthy. And so, I've kind of just used everything I've learned growing up here around the people I've been raised around, and use that to kind of, maneuver my future path. So that's a little bit about myself.
Terrific. So let's go to the beginning, right? Let's start where it started. It all began in your dance journey, and then we'll get to your bicycling in a bit. Most South Asian parents put their children into dance and art form, and I'm sure you were put into it, and you learned the classical Bharatanatyam style of. Okay.
Yes. So I began with Bharatanatyam, and I think it's really funny because I didn't start with Bharatanatyam. I actually started with Western styles. So when I was about 3 years old, I was just a very hyper child. I had a lot of energy, was always outdoors, and I'm very extroverted as well. So all my energy comes from being around other people. So that's kind of how dance started. We would have these Woodlands Indie associations where kids would come together and do a talent show and things like that. And that was really where I first started loving performing and being on the stage. And I had a very instinct sense of rhythm, which mom kind of picked up on as I was young and said, okay, well, maybe we can try to hone this on later. So I started doing ballet when I was about 4 years old. Um, and I think after I was set my foundations in ballet, I mean, not much, it was just about a few years. Mom was like, you know what, I think you should kind of transition into classical form. So I began Bharatanatyam lessons at the age of 5. And we usually say kids need to be at least 5 years old because classical art forms take a lot of discipline and a lot of patience, which is really hard for young kids, myself included. I began classical dance as it was like a social gathering for me, right? So with all the girls that I would dance with, it was like a play date every Wednesday. And my guru at the time was Priya Umesh, and Priya Auntie was like another mother to me. And so we would all gather in her garage, and, it was such a fun thing. And she unfortunately moved, but I was switched over to Ratna Auntie, Dr. Ratna Kumar, who's my current guru. And when I transitioned to Ratnanti was really when I started to set my foundations in classical dance. And, as a child, it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of patience to learn this art form. It's very, very demanding, both mentally and physically. And so as a child, I mean, quite honestly, I wasn't a huge fan. I'd always tell mom, like, Mom, this is really hard. I don't think I can do it. And she was like, nope, stick with it. Hard work pays off. So I stuck with it. I became very fond. I love my guru. My guru is like, again, another grandmother to me. And she really nurtured my skills. And I created such a strong community of girls within my dance classes. So that was really what kept pulling me back to class. I continued, I started dancing, and mom was like, I really think you can take this to another level. So she began taking me to India. It was one summer in particular where we just stayed there for 6 weeks, and I trained under like a very strict Indian teacher. And I think dance, it took a really long time for me to appreciate what it was doing for me, because it definitely did connect me back to my roots. But it's very hard to understand that as a child. So for me, it was like, oh my gosh, this is really demanding. And, growing up in the US, it was like I was always torn between the two cultures. I didn't know how to properly integrate them, right? So it was something I started to understand how to meld when I got older. But I think it did so much good for me. And when I was in 6th grade, I finished my Arangetram, which is essentially like your first solo debut. It's about a 3-hour performance, a solo performance. There's a live orchestra. You invite all your friends, and it's just, some people like to consider it a graduation, right? When you have mastered or semi-mastered the art form. But I remember when I finished my Arangetram, I was about 12 years old, and so many people came up to me after I finished the performance. They said, this is just the beginning. And I always think of dance as like a ladder, right? You have to work up. You learn your basics, and slowly with more performance experience, you learn, you get better. It's just, there's always room to improve, correct? So they just said, this is just the beginning. And as a kid, I was like, what? Like, what else am I supposed to do with this, And when I got to high school and late middle school, so around 8th grade, mom took me back to India and said, you can do it. Perform in Chennai, perform for like the main crowd, and just learn from the experience. And I think going back, I learned, most of my peers here, when they'd finished their engagement, it was just kind of like a one and done, like, okay, I've learned what I need to learn, it's over. And I went there and I understood that, doing your Engagement is just like putting your, foot in the door. If you don't have it done, it's like, okay, you've done your Engagement. What else have you done? Where have you performed? Who have you trained under? It's so much more than that, right? And I was like, okay, there's so much more for me to learn as well. One thing that classical dance did, I still try to keep up with it today, but like I said, it's very physically demanding. So if you are out of training for even just a few months, you will feel it whenever you go back in, right? And with classical dance, I appreciate it so much now because it has made me so much more aware of my own body. if I do dabble in Bollywood. I worked for a lot of entertainment companies in LA this past year when I was at school. And it's so funny because all of my directors wanted to make sure before I was ever hired that I had some training in a classical form, because when you have that, you're aware of your bodies, you're aware of how you carry yourself, your lines, everything just looks much cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
And I only realized that once I got there. So from classical dance, I've been able to learn, ballet. I've been able to learn hip hop, Bollywood, you name it, right? And I am so grateful to have a solid foundation in this dance form because it has provided me with so much more.
Yep.
That is kind of just like the basic structure of how it all began and how I've been able to grow from, the initial stages, but it was never like an easy one-way street.
Yeah.
There was always ups and downs, like you had said. So
Yeah. Good point. I mean, that's well said that you've had ups and downs. So when you started the first Arangetram, I'm sure that would have been especially performing in Chennai, where probably there was a big crowd. There were, people, you probably thought people are going to judge me. How did you handle that? Do you have a magic mantra do you have for yourself?
oh man, a magic mantra.
Like, what
My
do you tell
mom
yourself when?
my mom has always been, actually both my parents, when I went to perform in India, my mom was with me, and there were so many times I would come out of rehearsal and being in Chennai, it's really hot, XYZ, so many things factor into your experience there, but it's just so different than dancing in the US. For one, the audience is so much more knowledgeable. And so even here, if you make a little mistake on stage, you're able to, quickly like transition to something else and nobody knows, right? There, people are so informed about the art and the history behind every story. So even if you slip up a little bit, they're like, oh, I saw that. You know what I mean? So there was definitely a lot of pressure. And of course, just being in India because of the heat and the weather, you do have to be extremely fit in order to have the stamina to perform for 1 or 2 hours alone. That was probably the hardest thing for me because I performed in Chennai 2 years after my Arangetram. And so I had kind of lost the stamina that I had had when I was so young. And I would always look at mom and be like, Mom, I can't do this. This is so hard. I'm so sorry. I know we've put so much effort to get here, but like, this is just, oh man, I can't do it. And she'd be like, hey, this is not a can I not. This is a
Mhm.
you're going to do it. You have worked this far. You are here. Make the most of the experience. Do not cut out now. And hearing her say that over and over again, I never ever thought of it as like an, oh my God, like she's forcing me to do this kind of thing. It was like you know what? Yeah, you're right. I put so many hours into this and training for what? If I'm just going to throw it all away because I'm, tired or my stamina is not as good anymore. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I think getting on stage, I used to tell my mom this, it's so much easier to do an Arangetram than to even watch one. Because for me, I get that energy and I want to keep going when I'm on stage. And
Mhm.
I see audiences enjoying it, or when people say, oh my gosh, you're doing so great, like keep it up. That's the stuff that keeps me going. And, so I don't know if I really had a mantra, but definitely the encouragement of my guru and both of my parents, like, was my driving force, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. What I hear is that one, you were willing to take a chance. You knew you had put in the hard work, and you were willing to take a chance and say, "Hey, you know what? Let me go do what I have to do." I've the backing of my parents and my teacher. I'm going
Totally.
to
Yeah.
go what I can do. And then when you went there, you suddenly got energized by people actually cheering you on. And I mean, that's what I hear in what you're saying.
No, absolutely. Mom always asks, like, what was it like being on that stage on your engagement? I'm like, I don't remember because you're so in the moment when you're on any stage. I came off and I remember the next day my mom was like, were you tired? Like, what did it feel like? Was the audience like, did you see anyone? I was like, I don't even remember because you're so in the moment when you're on stage. The second you
Yeah.
get off, you're like, wow, that was so much fun. I can't wait to do it
You make
again.
an important point here, being in the moment, and as you get older, and when you did that, you were much younger, but as we all get older, one of the things that we all struggle with is being in the moment.
Totally.
And a lot of my focus about running and fitness is about all of us having the ability and the opportunity to be in the moment.
Hmm.
Because when you run and when you're in any form of intense physical activity, which also involves some amount of your mind, you end up being in the moment. So well said there. I think that's a great point you make.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, it's never easy. I think like talking about all of this, it may seem like, oh yeah, like she's got it in the bag. No, I don't. It's definitely something that you have to nurture over a long period of time. And there's been so many instances when I'm on stage and I will literally feel like I'm about to pass out, or just like my legs are going to give out. And I always sit there when I'm like thinking about the pain in the moment, it shows on your face.
Mhm.
You lose, your smile diminishes, your eyes might get a little bit, glossy. And I always just tell myself, if I'm not enjoying it, how is the audience going to enjoy it? If I'm not focusing on this moment, how is the audience going to focus on this moment?
Mhm.
Do you understand? So
Yeah,
that's kind of something that I guess that might be my mantra. I think it's
yeah.
just remembering to be present, enjoy the experience, and if you're gonna do it right, right?
Well said. Well said.
So
I think that's your mantra.
I think now that I'm saying it out loud, I think you might be right.
We
Yeah.
just discovered that mantra. You got to copyright it.
Well, there you go. I got to write it down now. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's a great message for all other people, or especially young adults who are watching this. That
Mhm.
life throws challenges and curveballs at us all the time. Especially if you're in high school, there's so much challenge around getting your homework assignments done. There's pressure of, oh my God, what am I going to do in life? What
Right.
subjects to choose? But something like a being pursuing dance or any other kind of fitness gets you back in the moment, which allows you to be who you are, and then you can figure out what to do.
Oh, absolutely. I think, um, my family, mom and dad, I as well, mom has made sure that, both Adi and I have grown up with a lot of culture around us. And, you know, growing up with that, I understood that it is a part of who I am. It will never be diminished, it will never be put to the side. I need to figure out how to balance both. As a student, as a kid growing up here in America and having a very, um, American schooling life and having very American social life. How do you let those two things intermingle? And it was it's not easy. Dance is, especially classical arts with Bharatanatyam, I would sometimes get conscious of performing in front of kids in my school because I was like, well, what if they think it's weird? What if they think that I'm dressed weird? Or if they say something, it's going to hurt because I love what I do, but they might not appreciate it the same way I do. Right. And that was something I still struggle with to this day, not in an embarrassing way, but making sure that I can convey how much I appreciate the form so that they can do it as well. And that was one thing I learned. Obviously, it came with maturity and surrounding yourself with the right kinds of people. But I learned from a very young age that it's not right to kind of sweep it under the rug and like live a dual sided
Mhm.
life. And I know that seems extreme, but as a kid, I do think that dance definitely helped me get more comfortable in my skin and understand at least what I would like to pass down to my kids as well. The lessons and the lifestyle. And it really has given me so much, not just, knowledge about, Indian roots, but also I think the main thing is discipline. Like if you're going to do something, like I said earlier, do it right. If you're going to stick with something, put your full effort into it and run through. Like just keep going, do not give up, do not let others impact the way that you view what you're doing. I think being prideful and being purposeful is the most important thing with dance and with everything else that I've done. So I kind of applied the same thing to the MS 150 experience, right? And that started because my dad actually had done it when I was in middle school. So we had driven right by him to Austin, saw him finish at the finish line, and he was, my dad had some health issues when I was a young kid, and the fact that he was able to overcome everything, do this, accomplish this huge feat, it was really, really inspiring to me. And I always thought to myself, like, I don't think I could ever ride a bike 150 miles. Like, that just seems like way too much. And I remember when I was in high school, he was like, wait, why don't you just do it with me? I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, I can't do this. And he goes, are you kidding? Like, if I can do it, you can do it, All it takes is discipline, really. And I was like, okay, well, how do we do this? And I still had all my dance stuff going on. And my dad was awesome because he really catered all my training around my dance schedule. So we would go to spin classes, which was like a really nice way for me to bond with him also. We went to spin classes before I would go to school, and we would do them after I would go, after I'd come back home. And on weekends, we would leave the house at like 6:30 in the morning and go on like a 35, 40-mile bike ride up to Lake Conroe, come back. And then I would get like an hour to eat, refresh, and then my mom would take me to dance class in Sugarland. So it was, it definitely kept me on the go. And there were times when I would sit there and be like, why am I doing this to myself? This is way too much, especially being in high school and everything. But the MSM50 definitely taught me that, like, you can't, if you look at something, so the goal, riding 150 miles, that was like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? But there's you break it down into smaller pieces, right? You start with training, you ride 15 miles, then you ride 20, then 25, and you slowly work your way up. It just made me realize that, like, every goal can be broken down into specific parts. And once you achieve each of those milestones, the main thing just seems like a piece of cake. And he definitely was like behind me, and he was like, you can do it. I would always be like, Dad, I'm tired. My arms are killing me. My legs hurt. I can't. He'd be like, 5 more miles, literally 5 more miles. You've just done 30. You can do 5 more. I'd be like, okay, fine. Yeah, you're right. So he was like my cheerleader, I want to say, when it came to the MS-150. And I also saw, actually, I know that you asked, I haven't seen a lot of teenagers do the MS-150. I actually was inspired by another teenager in the Woodlands. Her name is Manasi Joshi, and she did it with all the dads. So she was the only kid that had done it at her time, and she was such a high achieving student. And so she had a packed schedule, nothing like mine, way more busy. And she was able to do it. And I was like, whoa, like, she is awesome. But again, just staying on top of your stuff, breaking it down into little bits, and whatever you dedicate that one weekend to, achieving that goal, and it happens. And I also had an awesome group of kids who did it with me too. So, Ashray Gurgunti, Vaishnav Gurvanka, his brother, tons of kids here did it with me. And it was such an amazing moment, going through Austin. And I think one of my most vivid memories was biking up those last hills in Austin, because those, like, those are.
Did you do the longer one, or did you take the longer route when?
I don't quite remember. I probably didn't, knowing myself. But I remember coming past those, the few hills at the very, very end, and they were killing me. I was like, I'm about to get off my bike and start walking because this is too much. And there was a guy who came and biked next to me. He was like, hey, how old are you? And I was like, whatever, 14, 15 at the time. And he put his hand on my back, and he was like 65. He was like, come on, if I can do it, you can do it. And I was like, oh my God, okay. So we all started pedaling together. And so, yeah, it was such a fun experience. And
so you were 15 when you did the first one?
The first one when I was 15, yeah.
Wow.
It was so
amazing.
Cool. It was so cool. I loved that experience. And actually, Mom, one of her childhood friends has MS, and I remember she called me after, and I went to go visit her in Chicago. And she is definitely going through a lot of hardship right now with her health. And her name's Sita Auntie. And she was like, thank you so much for doing this for us. And I think that like when you work hard, it pays off because you feel it at the end of the race. But when you talk to people that are actually benefiting from the money that you're raising and from what your effort has gone towards, I think that was that really made a difference for me too. It made me want to do it again.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what motivated you, and you just answered that question.
Yeah, yeah, it was her. And they have, I mean, you know this, they have people standing on the sides, especially when you cross through the smaller
Mhm.
towns. I'm on the way there, who will sit there on their wheelchairs and be like, thank you for writing for me, and we'll hold up signs for you and blow bubbles. And it's such a fun experience. I loved the MS 150. So
And
yeah.
then you did it another year, right? You followed it up.
Yeah. So that was my first year. So my first year, actually, it was cut short because the second
Mhm.
leg got rained out. And then the second year is when we went all the way to Austin, and that was the year that we had the worst headwinds. So it was a challenge. It felt nothing like what I had trained for,
What
but
year was this? This was
it was
2018. Was it 2018 or?
either 17 or 18. I can't
18.
remember quite off the top of my head. I probably should have reviewed that, but I think it was 2008. No, it wasn't 2000. I think it was 2017.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's the year I did the MS 152. It was windy, the
it
windy
was
year.
tough.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
no easy feat, but again, like I look back and I don't really remember any of the pain. I just remember, the good parts. So I really enjoyed that experience. That was something that I was glad to be a part of. So
And are you planning to continue doing this on a regular basis?
so I will say I think like this so MSN50 was such a cool thing, but I unfortunately didn't take part in it my senior year, which is something that I actually really do regret. And I do go to school out of state, so it's just not an option at this point. But I think my senior year, I actually had taken a break from dancing, towards the middle of the year, just to, spend more time with my friends and family. And I really let go of myself. And I don't mean that in like a weird cynical way, but in terms of physical fitness, dance and biking and all of those extracurricular activities that I'd constantly been working towards, they had just kept me so physically in shape and mentally in shape, right? And not having that physical outlet, it was also my stress reliever, right? And I started gaining a little bit of weight, and I just felt lethargic a lot. And um, I my summer before I left for college, I was like, wow, I really don't feel good about myself anymore. I have just really let go of it. Why did I do this? And when I got to college, I was in California. So the whole there's definitely a lot of like health and wellness just interspersed with your social life. So, going and doing yoga with people, or going to the beach, or surfing and things like that. It's very much integrated. And also, many millennials now are very conscious of being healthy and are very aware of their physical and mental wellness. And so when I got to college, I started taking spin classes again, and I loved them. I was dancing part-time for some companies, and I would just go to the gym a lot more than I ever did in high school. And again, it was just a way for me to like work off stress. And I would come out and I would feel really, really good. I'd feel more awake. And yeah, I definitely like depended on that in order to, keep up with myself, not even just like body image or anything. It was just making sure I didn't lose myself, and, having that like go-getter, just constantly, I'm not sure, I'm like losing my words for this, but yeah, just, really just
Yep.
not losing myself. It was
You
something.
brought out an interesting point. You talked about body image, and this is something that I hear a lot more, even from my daughters. And when I grew up, I think when I was, I guess, in your age group of 17 to 20, I don't know whether I was not aware if somebody else was dealing with the body image issue or not, but at least I can say for myself, I was not too aware of it as much as I see it very prevalent among young people now. Uh, so what are your views? I mean, is how does your generation handle that? How is it handling that?
That's a great question. I think that for my generation, it is very different than what our parents have grown up with, right? And that's only because of social media. Um, on social media, any kid, any age gets on there. You're seeing pictures, and people always portray the best sides of themselves online, right? And even if people have to edit a little bit, or change things here and there in order just to post a good picture on whatever social network, it still does deter your image of what an expectation is, right? So in terms of body imaging, especially for kids who are starting to go into high school, I feel like that is when it affects them the most, because you start to grow more aware of your social presence and the way that others view you, right? So you're learning about yourself, but you're also learning about who you want to be. And of course, people always want to portray the best sides of themselves. And I think when there's that much pressure out there to be so perfect all the time, if you don't have the ideal beauty standard, body, hair type, skin color, whatever it might be, it can be very difficult to cope with, because some of those things are out of your control, right? And I wouldn't say that I had body imaging issues, but I realized I was very aware of it in that senior year of high school, when I was a little bit less active. All of my friends were athletes. They were all varsity track runners, varsity volleyball players, and I was a dancer, and that kept me in good shape for all my life. But when I got to high school, senior year, and I was like, oh, I don't look like I used to before. I don't feel like I used to before. I definitely did feel the pressure of like, okay, I got to get myself together. Let's do this. And maybe that was self-inflicting a bit, but definitely there is a presence of that around you. And there's nothing you can do to really, avoid it. It will always be there. But I think that your personal thoughts and your personal beliefs of what makes you doing what makes you feel good, eating what makes you feel good, is so important. And it's really hard to grasp that concept at such a young, naive age, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of body imaging, I think we have come such a long way too, from when I was in middle school even till now. So many body positive movements and things are out there, which I think is amazing, and that's how it should be, because everyone's body is different, and I think people put so much on that weighing scale. They really depend a lot of their self-worth and how they value themselves over what that number is. And I think people fail to understand that that number can look different for every human being. Your body type, your height, your genetics, those all play into, what you look like. And as long as you are comfortable in your own skin, that's all that should matter. And I think it's definitely much easier said than done. This is like, I'm spitting out so many cliches, but really, I think once you've been there and if you've dealt with those hardships and you've come out understanding like, hey, you know what? I may not be, 100 pounds and, 5'8", but I'm happy and I feel healthy. I look healthy. And that's all that really matters to me. I think you're winning. Like, that's really just all you need in the end. But again, it's hard because there's different standards out there.
No, well said. Well said. I think the key takeaway in whatever you're saying is as we need to focus on effort, right? I think as long as you're focused on what you can control, which is if you want to pursue fitness, going out doing those workouts, or going out and going for your bicycle ride, or going for your run, is something you can control.
Yeah.
You can say, I'll get up in the morning tomorrow and I'll go. Now that's something you can control. You can control what you eat. You can control your hobbies. You can control what to do about your hobbies, what kind of pursuits you can have. If you love dance, you can go practice dance, and the kind of things that you've demonstrated. So I think those are things we can control. And what we don't control is the body shape and all of that. And there isn't really any merit in agreeing to somebody bullying you on that, isn't it?
Yeah. No.
So I think the key message I would say for anyone listening to this would be, hey, if you want to take control of what you can do, and the rest of it is something that, let it be.
Exactly. I think it's just about being comfortable in your own skin and not to compare yourself to anyone else. Because again, everybody runs their own race. And I was told this even throughout, the college process, people be like, you're going to see kids who are applying, to crazy, crazy good schools, and maybe some, other people who aren't. And you run your own race. And I think that applies to literally everything. Even I will struggle to run 3 miles. I'm not afraid to say it. Even 2 miles, I will struggle. But even just getting out there, maybe doing like a few sprints, or even just doing like a jog for 20 minutes. I come back and I feel like I've done something. I'm sweating. I feel good about myself. And no, I can't run a half marathon, probably not even a 5K, but I feel good. Right. And I think it's so hard, because I think a lot of kids, especially now, I know kids that are younger than me who I've grown up around, and they count calories and they do all these things, which is like completely their choice. That if that works for you, that's fine. But again, as a kid, I think, like as a young adult, especially, you can't deprive yourself of so much just because you want to maintain a certain standard. At some point, people used to say, like, what do you eat? Like, Samyu, what do you eat? What do you do? Like, how do you keep yourself in shape? And I was like, I eat what makes me feel good. Once you start being active and you're out on the street, you're outside, you're getting yourself going, you come back in and then you eat what, like a burger and massive thing of mac and cheese. Like, that doesn't make me feel good. May make someone else feel good, but it doesn't work for me. So I never say no. I think that's the one thing. I never ever say no, but I keep in mind what makes me feel good, right? And I think that's just something everybody has to remember. Don't ever deprive yourself of something because you're scared of how it'll make you look. Just do what makes you feel good. So that's something that I've always stuck by. And I think it's really easier said than done when it comes to, especially millennials and Gen Z, dealing with those issues. There's a lot that you can't control. But at the end of the day, like, you're on your own race. Like, just do what makes you feel good, and nothing else should really matter. And over time, like, you come to understand that. So
well said. Terrific. Samyu, I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot. I learn every time I have a podcast. I have these terrific people who come on this podcast. I'm very selfish. This podcast is for me, actually.
No, I have actually loved doing this. I haven't had to, sit down and talk about even myself and my own experiences in such a long time. So I'm really glad that I was able to kind of voice this, because also sometimes, it helps me in the end to, like, oh, right. Yeah, that is what I've worked towards. Maybe, kind of lights you to keep going. So I really enjoyed this too, but thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Okay. Any last comments before we wrap up?
No, I think, you just, again, you run your own race, do what makes you feel good. If you're going to do anything, do it with your best effort, and just have purpose in everything you do. And I'm sure, any athlete, anyone who works towards a goal has to have those ingrained in them, but sometimes you just have to remind yourself to keep doing so. And so I'm actually really glad that I did this with you, because now I can write those things down and keep saying them to myself. So anyways,
Awesome.
that would be all, but thank you so much, really.
Thank you for joining us, and I really hope that A lot of people of young adults are going to listen to this and given their inputs and thoughts and think about what we talked about today.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Samyu. Bye.
Bye.